So let's talk about Lavender Town as from what we understand it as. Lavender Town in Pokemon was always supposed to be like a place where the dead could be buried. And it was kind of like some people have often thought, was it out of place for a Pokemon game? Well, I'll tell you what, I don't necessarily think so. Because when Pokemon first came out, it was stated that Pokemon wasn't just supposed to be for kids, it was supposed to be for like everybody. So, and people in Japan don't really censor their stuff as far as their like culture goes. I mean, like you might think. So, it's actually worth noting that this was actually something pretty interesting that I always thought was interesting over the years. So, fast forward to Gen 2's prototype, if you play Pokemon Reforged, if assuming all that data is accurate based on the 1997 Space World demo, and it was also, all the original data. Come to find out, we always thought 3 years later that there was a Pokemon radio tower they built over the Pokemon Tower. But come to find out, it wasn't the same building. No, as a matter of fact, it was actually just moved in place of it. But what's really interesting is they decided to scrap all the extra content because they thought they ran out of cartridge space, but then they downgraded some stuff to make more room for some more maps because they probably wanted to make the Kanto region a realistic size. So that's kind of what had happened at the time, especially when they wrote that compression algorithm for Game Freak, that's Satoru Iwata, I believe. Yeah. So it's also worth noting that the Pokemon Tower originally actually was still there. It was right around the same number of floors, and it wasn't as haunted, let's say, as like we wanted to believe. Like the spirits have calmed at that time though. And what was interesting is there was another Pokemon there that was it was a ghost type bear. Like it was like a ghost. It was like a Paysang or something like that. It's not a Pokemon that I know of that has been recycled. It's kind of like a ghost type panda, sort of. And so it's basically a Japanese bear, basically, with a big giant spell tag symbol on its chest, sort of. So, I mean, it's possible that maybe they might have took the concept, because that Pokemon was scrapped, and then they eventually recycled it into either, I wouldn't say Mischievous, but I would always argue, because Mischievous was always my favorite Pokemon, as far as ghosts go. But also, well, and then there was Lunala that was a ghost type too, if I remember correctly. But anyways, so, but what's interesting though is you had, what Pokemon was it? I'm trying to remember. So it was haunted by a Gengar. And I think they took that same concept, and that's why Gengar could be found in the painting in Gen 4. They recycled that in Gen 4. But it was a concept in Gen 2 because Gengar was supposed to be haunting the Paysang. But at the same time, a lot of people didn't know what was going on. But you could see the Gengar, though. So after you were able to get rid of the Gengar, either you could catch it or you defeated it. The Paysang would feel better because it was like bringing ominous, feelings to it, trying to drag it into hell, basically, as they describe it as. But it's interesting though because Gengar was always, like we know, Gengar was always a very malevolent spirit. It always had those looks on its eyes, and if you could see it in the dark, like if its red eyes were glowing, you'd be able to tell it's a Gengar because it's the way it looks. Nobody smiles like that. Gengar standing in the dark. But it's interesting though because a lot of people don't know that. The Space World demo changed a lot of stuff. Some maps were scrapped, but at the same time, some locations were just a lot bigger than they originally were because it was like they focused more on the Johto than they did focusing on just the Kanto itself. And so that's what I feel like they really wanted to do even when Gen 1 came out, but they just didn't know how to approach it. And so that's why I feel like when Gen 2's prototype came out, they decided to rewrite it, but they wanted to create a different region, but then they decided to add Kanto into it, because, again, Gen 2 was supposed to be a sequel to Gen 1, and it still was a sequel, because it took place 3 years after Gen 1 had already been finished. So, how much more different Gen 1 would have been as far as the prototype goes, it's very interesting, actually. And here's something I didn't think about until now. Let's say Gen 1 actually was finished the way it was supposed to be. How would Gen 2 reflect on Gen 1's prototype data that wasn't in Gen 1's final version as of right now? You know, so it'd be like prototype data and a prototype. That would actually been interesting. So, had they would have kept everything in Gen 1 like they wanted to, Gen 2 would have been even longer then. So who's to say like what it would have been, how much more different it would have been. But this is just one of those ideas, and if I find more information, I will let you know more about it. So hopefully you learned something new, because I'll tell you what, I sure did.